the main topic for this one, as we agreed, was going to be on track days. But I remembered that when we had that last conversation, when we talked about the difference between V4 and inline four, what's
Yeah.
the advantage and all that. And I said, oh, I'll do some research. Well, I did. I went and did some research, and this is what I found. And I'll read it out. The V4 configuration offers several key advantages over the traditional inline four, particularly in high performance racing. And there's five advantages they talk about and also a trade off. Number one, compact design and weight distribution. Yeah, the V4 engine's more compact than inline four because of the V arrangement, and that compact design allows for better packaging within the motorcycle, better aerodynamics, more central and lower placement of mass, which enhances handling, etc. Number two, power delivery and traction. The V4 configuration often features that big bang firing order or irregular firing intervals. Now, I find this fascinating too, which improves rear wheel traction by delivering power in pulses. Gives that rear tire more time to regain grip between the power strokes. So
Amazing.
this smooths power delivery in a particular way that's advantageous during cornering exits where traction's critical. That's interesting because that was one of the big factors of the cross plane Yamaha motor, wasn't it?
Yeah.
They smoothed out that, or made it more of a pulsy type engine and gave it more traction. Interesting. Number three, aerodynamic efficiency, narrow engine profile, uh, contributes to reduced frontal area, obviously, and particularly important, in those high speed scenarios like MotoGP and Superbike. And it's showing too, isn't it? In the data and the results. Chassis design flexibility. The smaller size of the V4 provides engineers with greater freedom in designing the frame and swing arm, which can enhance rigidity and improve handling. Interesting. And the last one, higher RPM capability. I reckon V4 engines can typically achieve higher RPMs due to their shorter crankshafts and reduced vibration compared to inline four engines. So that enables more aggressive tuning for top end power. Interesting. Um,
That's something I would definitely have not. I would have thought it would be the other way that a four-cylinder screamer is exactly that would have more high end. But
yeah. I mean, I don't, as a mechanic, I remember pulling apart engines and looking at crankshafts and the an inline six, the each crankshaft, wrong, each conrod had to have its own place on the crankshaft. Then you get into V8s and that you can actually put two conrods correct side by side on one area, so you got a weight reduction straight away. So I guess that probably relates to the V4 as well. But yeah. Trade-offs, cost and complexity. The V4 engine is more expensive and complex to manufacture due to the layout requiring more precise engineering and additional components. Uh, for example, dual cylinder banks and, the cooling systems associated with that. And the weight, believe it or not, I was surprised with this. While compact, a V4 engine can be slightly heavier than an inline four due to additional components. So there's a reduction in one area, so that would be spinning mass like crankshaft, but then there's an increase in non-spinning mass,
yeah,
such
yeah,
as,
yeah.
you know, yeah, interesting. So the conclusion is the choice of a V4 engine in racing motorcycles is often driven by its superior power delivery, handling, dynamics, and aerodynamic advantages, which are critical in competitive racing. Inline four, while simpler and more cost-effective, may lack the same level of performance. And oh well, proof's in the pudding. They're all moving to V4s, aren't they?
Yeah, and I can understand specifically the aerodynamic piece because it's sort of my background and all the Bernoulli stuff. Uh, it has a exponential negative effect, right? Aerodynamics. So, and there's obviously a minimum height or a height window that the GP and superbikes have to stick in.
Hmm.
Um, but the width by reducing width, only a small amount will have a massive change
Hmm.
for punching something through the air. And that was the key. One of the key designs of the New Zealand Britain, was to try and get around some or cheat some of the aerodynamic stuff. So he made a V twin and made it narrow and changed the shape to move air a certain way to try and reduce because his goal was all the high speed stuff, Daytona and all the rest of it. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, you can see how that's and complexity. Well, GP
Yeah.
bikes. complex anyway, right? So, um, yeah, interesting, very interesting.
I was listening to the Patreon account with the Moto PG boys.
Mm.
Tugs Fredo and Boris Mihailovic. They did an interview with Simon Crafter, and he was talking about some subtle changes to, and not to steal their thunder, I'm sure Simon's talked about it and it's public knowledge. The He noticed that they were changing the aerodynamics on the Yamaha to give it the same feel in terms of its downforce and all that and cornering, but reduce the surface area in some way so that you had higher speed. So they're trying to gain speed without changing the effect of it, through.
Yeah,
It's pretty tricky, the whole thing. I mean, it's amazing where
yeah,
it's going.
yeah. It really is. And those side, wings are very visceral and sort of binary. You can see
Yeah.
um, 1 + 1 = 2, whereas the internal ducting and what happens when you lean a bike over, what happens when you brake,
Yeah.
how all the things that sort of most cars don't really do is a new
Yeah,
is a
right.
new
Ground
facet.
effect. Yeah, ground effect with fairings and cornering and holy mackerel.
Yeah. So some of the bikes got wider for
Mm,
aero to give
mm.
them more traction when they leant over. So they need to be able to reduce the burden when they're straight up and down, so that they are more effective when you bend them over. And obviously, if you bend something over, it's going to maybe they have a positive effect on the outside and a negative on the inside, but it has to be able to Vicky Verka when you go the other way. So
Yeah,
yeah,
right.
I think they'd be pretty tight-lipped in the aero department if someone started trying to find out what was really going on.
Well, apparently, Ducati hold off on their revealing. Like they in the testing, they just did it. Where they test, Jerez,
Barcelona or
Barcelona, yeah, wherever they tested, just recently, straight after Catalonia. Um, they didn't test anything, that was visible, things like that. And they're probably, and I heard a whisper that they're saving that until the test just before the racing begins because it's going to be too late for everyone else to copy it. So,
okay.
yeah. Anyway, let's talk track
uh,
days.
Track days.
Yeah. So as I communicated with you, I thought, there's probably three parts to this whole thing that we could talk about. Number one, and this came up in conversation with Steve Brogy from Mega about getting the most out of track days, and that was the topic of having targets or objectives for the track day, so you're not just going there and out chasing time or doing laps. Number two, preparing a bike for track days, and that other one, just handy stuff to take to track days and get your views of those topics. So why don't we kick off with that first one? Having a target, having an objective for track days. I know Steve mentioned this. He said, not everyone's going to have that. And I hadn't even thought about it, by the way. He said, some people just turn up just to go and ride some laps. You know what I mean? Get on a track and just ride some laps and have fun out there and, experience Phillip Island or wherever the track might be. But people who want to get faster or who want to be a racer probably should have a plan around, things specifically that they want to achieve while, are there. So, what are your thoughts about that whole concept?
Yeah, I think it will really depend on where you're at with your own writing. So, most of my experience at the moment, or where I focus on when I'm at a track day, is working with first timers and newcomers. And so, most of my awareness and attention is on um, bringing new people to the track and
Right.
the differences there. Then you get a lot of the track day or the race guys coming up and going, "Hey, can you follow me or can you have a look see, etc., etc." So I totally agree. I think your experience level will dictate whether you walk in with a detailed plan or whether you just sort of want to survive the day. You got sort of some people in between who might have bought a new bike and really just want to try the bike, make sure the bike's mechanically safe, make sure the ergonomics of your machine suit
Yeah.
you. Um, there's such a big range of it, but I agree that you should have maybe if it doesn't have to be exactly a plan, but at least a theme, so that you feel at the end of the day that you've somehow progressed or you've got your sort of time and effort's worth. Because the amount of effort you put into being ready and loading up and getting there is just as much as what you're going to do when you're there, right? So,
Yeah, right.
uh, yeah,
Recently I went to Manton Park, which is the new track in Townsville, and
right,
I took the double R down there, and as you know, we just fitted, some high end bi-turbo race suspension. Shout out to Jess Alter and the team down there at Ride Dynamics. Um, Basically, the intention was twofold, and that was to, work on the suspension, just get a setup that felt pretty good. And the second thing was do a bit of a trial or a test on these new Supercorsa SPV4 tyres,
yeah,
which friggin' amazing, by the way, for track stuff. But I always thought about this, and I guess this must be, it might come from my thoughts when we're doing coaching, particularly of the people who want to get faster and that is, for me, the target was to maintain or, attain a level of precision that I thought was relevant to, riding well on a track. And I'm talking about particularly apexes,
right,
the goal being, um, within a couple of inches of a tight apex rather than this a foot out or a foot and a half out or something. And that type of precision makes a big difference. But what that meant for me is I've got a very specific target, which I can assess straight away because I know whether or not I've hit, a tight apex or not. It still meant pulling it back to, in this case, I only rode about 70% down there or something. So I still had to pull it back in order to attain that target because, you could go out and ride super hard on these new tyres and suspension and then, you become inaccurate or you get lazy on the steering or something. So, I'm a, big fan of it, even though I'm not even racing, I'm only doing the school. So, yeah, that was my experience recently.
And so, how much when you put the new suspension on? I'm guessing it took you two or three rotations to ensure that you were happy. You might have had a few clicks here, a few clicks there, and you would have set up sags and things statically right before you went out and hit it with pace. Um, did you find you had a setting in the morning that then you adjusted later on in the day, or was it basically one set up and you were good to go?
It was interesting because I got to trial this more on range riding. So I took the bike out and we made a lot of adjustments in terms of the geometry as well as the damping and that on the ranges. The only difference was you're getting off more of a street ride, whereas there's a lot more bumps than there is on the racetrack. So it was pretty close. But what I did do was a couple of gross movements in the damping settings. And then I ended up going back to what it was because it was
Oh,
bloody awesome. Yeah. So that only took one rotation, So it wasn't like I went there with suspension cold, not knowing where it was and what it would feel like. So, yeah. So it was a bit of an advantage. But the big one was just, focusing. Yeah, I'm trying to get, an assessment of is the suspension right? What do I think about those tires? But whilst maintaining that goal around precision.
yeah.
Yeah, but that's what I did.
Awesome.
Yeah, but anyway, so it's food for thought for anyone listening if they're going to be, serious about racing or just getting better as a rider. That it helps to go there, And I think you and I both agree to have some sort of theme in mind rather than just go out and ride like a maniac and, reinforce bad habits, which is pretty easy to do.
Yeah, and I think if you take everything that a track has in essence, and you can always apply a plan to that, right? So the track has a controlled environment that's known. That normally the conditions are the same. You come to New Zealand, things change. But in Townsville, I'm
Yeah,
guaranteeing it was 35 degrees, probably 40 degrees all day, every day, right?
yeah,
Um,
correct.
and so when you have this super controlled environment, then you can set a plan like I'm going to be really focused on hitting my apexes. And if there's 10 turns or 15 turns, or my home track has seven, in a 15-minute session, you can really just get that consistency out and get that measurability. And it doesn't have to be stopwatch stuff. It
Yeah,
just has to be, I want to feel better through this segment or through this turn. Because it's not like you're going out on the range and there might be traffic or might be something else. So because it is that controlled environment, then yeah, that's where you can tailor that plan to be achievable.
yeah. Do you think, like, a question that just came to mind then? Do you think there's any disadvantages of people monitoring lap times?
Yeah. Well, I have experienced the tunnel vision of a stopwatch.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so my old race bike used to have a data logger, lap timer built-in dash. So and you'd get the green light or the red light of doom,
You're right.
basically saying whether you've done better or worse than your previous lap. So it's it's something that's very easy to get focused on, and obviously a track day is not a race day, so they're different. They're different environments, and normally a track day you have a bit more traffic and higher track congestion and things like that. But I personally think it's better to ride to a stage where you feel comfortable, and then if you're going for performance, have a session where you do performance, and then have a session that you don't do measured performance. Because watching a lap time, it's yeah, for me it gets really you're just targeting on one specific thing, and yes, we are trying to get the performance out of it, but you're not really delving into the why. You're only delving at the result, and
Yeah.
you know. There could be better ways to see what you're doing, which is putting a camera on your bike or getting to ride with someone else, and they might notice that you've changed your style and you're charging one turn and slowing down too much, but you get better drive out of another turn. So your lap time could be the same, but your style of riding could have changed.
Yeah.
And that's sort of where the number is a number, but it's not an overall picture. It's literally, black and white, 50-50 of you could do 5 laps that are all completely different and have 5 laps that are the same lap time, but you could ride them differently each time. So yeah, it depends on what you're after, right? So
Yeah. Ian, actually, I talked to Ian yesterday and he spoke about that, where they look at the data, they get the data from the motorcycle and they get to compare and they find that even though two riders might have the same times, they get their time in different
so
places. They actually get more value out of separating it by the little pieces and going, well, what are you doing in this area? Okay, now the time comes from that. So,
And
yeah,
the
you're right.
ideal would be that you ride with two, another person on the same machine with a
Yeah.
similar setup. Because as you were discussing with the V4, a V4 bike might be used slightly different to a inline four, different engine capacities. So you can get a faster guy on a 600 that's going to have mid-turn speed that you'll never be able to replicate if you're riding a big thousand, maybe. So yeah, it just sort of depends on what you're targeting.
Yeah. Bike prep for track days. So, what for you would be the most common issues that come up in terms of people not preparing their bike properly? When it comes to them going and doing track days, whether they're a racer or not.
I think the most common, the very easy problems that pop up are normally to do with the controls of the motorcycle, and that's usually related to how they got their motorcycle there. So if they've traded their bike, often people use a tie down on the grips.
Right.
There's a certain setup where you can put the tie down. It's like a girdle or a
Another
set of
one.
stirrups over the
Slips.
handlebars and over the
Yeah.
grips,
Yeah. The
and
little.
then tie down on the trailer, right? And they're notorious for moving grips. And 9 times out of 10, they move the grips inwards. And what they normally does is make the throttle really sticky.
Right.
So it pulls the throttle in more into the throttle mechanism. The grip goes up on the throttle tube, and you end up with a grip that when you open the throttle and let go, it sits there and won't snap closed. So that's a real common like scrutineering catch, a sticky throttle. Um, and yeah, so it's normally an easy fix, which is good, but that's the style of how people got their bikes here. Or heated grips in New Zealand are really popular, so big, you
Another
know,
one.
aftermarket ones, and they can create the same sort of problem, sticky throttle or issues like that. So I created a bit of a video with Total Track Bot Hire for people, a bit of a check of what people would do or should do before a track day. And I sort of broke it down into things that you can't fix on the day are kind of the ones you want to check real early, right? So fork seals leaking, brake pads all the way down, tire wear all the way down. So those are sort of the key any sort of leaks with regards to oil, brake fluid, or coolant. So those things we can't. It's really hard to fix on the day.
Yeah.
It normally creates way more stress than you'd ever want. Don't see too many of them. Fork seals are kind of popular, not popular, but you often turn up to someone who's had a track bike that sat for a long time, and then they pull out of the shed and actually was they probably popped the fork seal last track day and didn't notice. And of course, if you don't sort of go over the bike and you rock on up to the track day, it's pretty much game over, right? With the fork
Yeah.
seal, with the upside down forks at least, just go straight onto the brake calipers and brakes. And it's
Yeah.
pretty much a no go. And then tyres. People sort of expect that tyres will last a whole lot longer than they think. So get a lot of guys and girls turning up with tyres on the wear markers, or that terrible highway step from the commuting, which can make it really hard. Or just your track day experience is um, going to be harder than it needs to be to try and smooth it out. And it's 9 times out of 10 it's gone. It's the tyres sort of done its dash because you've got a big flat spot.
Yeah.
What do you?
Yeah, I think you covered the majority of the things that I've seen, and mainly it's the common issues that keep popping up. There's the usual stuff that you would do, tape the glass up and check nuts and bolts and fuel the bike and all that sort of thing. But brake pads, I've seen a couple of times, people come along and their brake pads are right down towards the end. Like you say, tire condition. It's surprising how many people turn up on a track day and they need new tires. It blows me away, that one. I turn up with new tires. I don't get this old tire thing. Chains over tightened. That is
Yeah,
surprisingly common.
I
Like
agree.
the bikes on the stand, they've probably tightened it with the wheel, all the way down, like supported, unsupported.
Yeah,
And and then you sit on the bike and it's like a guitar string, ding ding, yeah. And I think people don't realize that, when that bike is sitting there, then there should be 40 to 50 mil of slack in the chain, in that vicinity because there's a lot of pressure on that chain. So that one there pops up a lot. The other one that I think you kind of alluded to it, and I've seen this a few times, oil filler caps coming out and oil filters coming loose. And I don't know if you were there for that one. We did one of the schools where an oil filter came loose on someone's thousand. Man, he rode that bike all the way back to the pits, right, and did half a lap on the race line with oil coming out of the oil filter. And I remember we spent the next 2 hours or 3 hours sweeping up, laying out kitty litter and trying to get rid of the oil. But oil filler caps and oil filters, I check them all the time when we're doing the scrutineering because, that they come out. So that they would be the big ones for me that need to be, given attention beyond the normal stuff.
no, I agree. The oil filter, I haven't seen for a very long time. My track bikes, I put a hose clamp on and lock wire, and for me, you don't require. Often there's enough things to lock wire too, and people will be able to YouTube how to lock wire oil filter on.
Yeah.
Um, and you don't have to drill. Often you don't have to drill into things to lock wire and oil filter on. It's not like you got to drill a sump plug. So the 30 seconds extra it takes me to lock wire up my oil filters is is really really I think it's a great insurance
Yeah.
to not let them come loose. And I actually write on the front of my filter when I've changed it.
Yeah.
So I've
Right.
got a little bike pen, and that way, just because I have multiple people jump on the bike, so I can sort of keep and I always change all of them at the same time. I can keep an eye on, or I can go back through my list of how many rides the bike has experienced on
Yeah.
that current set of oil. So it's a good little way of tracking how old your oil is if you've got a track day bike.
Yeah.
Um, then you know how many days you do. Yeah, oil filler caps.
You can mine's lock wired on as well. The oil
Nice.
filter cap. Well, actually, it's not a lock wire. It's an Alpha Racing one
Oh yeah.
that comes with a wire and a pin.
Yeah, perfect. Little cotter pin. Yeah,
Correct.
awesome. Why not? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they come loose. It happens.
And often I've found the GB racing covers, fantastic engine protection. Most of them, I haven't seen anything recently that hasn't had a pre-made hole for a lock wire. So you don't have to drill your engine bolt or engine casing or a tab or anything like that. The protection itself has got a little loop for you to feed lock wire through. So yeah, a little cotter pin. Job's good. Just all it will take is stops at that half quarter of a turn for it to start going loose, right? So
Do
We
you?
had a student turn up. Sorry to jump in there. We had a
You're right.
student turn up to CSS. He had his number one bike unloaded in the garage, his number two bike on the trailer. And as I was walking down, I was in level one at Manfield. I was walking down the steps. I looked at, I know him quite well, know him personally, and I saw that it didn't have a fuel cap. Like the fuel cap was a screw-in cap,
Yeah.
and the cap had gone. So somehow it wasn't tightened and it worked its way loose on the trailer and disappeared, exit stage left. So yeah, anything that can rattle loose every now and then will, right?
Well, that's right. If it's a screw-in thing, it can come loose. I mean, it's possible. You mentioned wiring on, like because I do the same with a bunch of things on the bike, and I don't even race this bike, but the oil filter's one. Is there what else do you wire on a bike? With lock wire,
So yeah, oil filter filler cap, the caliper bolts on my 300s,
brakes. Yeah.
yeah, brake bolts. I'm very lucky, or that setup is really simplistic, so you don't have to take the caliper off
Yeah,
to
right.
change a wheel.
Yeah.
And not many bikes are like that. Most bikes you have to remove the calipers to pull the front wheel out. But because you don't on the Ninja 300s, it means that you really can lock wire those caliper bolts and sort of leave them until you do new pads so that the calipers don't come off. Because I have definitely seen that caliper bolts coming off, and that's not a sort of a folk tale. It's something that happens
Yeah.
regularly, and obviously the effect of that is pretty massive. So that's one thing I try and do. And there's not too. I lock wire grips usually. So
I was going
on
to
the hand,
ask. I was going to ask you about that, because a lot of people just glue them on. Because
yep,
I do the same here. It's glue and wire.
same. Yeah, yeah. So it seems to be that they do, and I like a real grippy grip. I've got driven. I can't remember the exact model, but I have they're sort of grippy on one side, and then they change the grip to the other. I find them really, really aggressive with regards to traction, and quite soft. So it means you don't have to grip physically a lot to turn the grips. So, but it means that you can work them on the bar, right? So, yeah, I like to glue and lock wire them on, and that way they don't start spinning or move up and down on the handlebar like we were talking before.
I bought a set of, I think it's rentals from Shane Kinderis down at S1K Racing, you know,
Mm.
BMW specialist, and they come with the lock wire grooves in them.
Oh, nice. Yeah,
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah. So when you put the lock wire on, when it folds in, it is actually inside
Yeah.
or underneath,
A
a
Reese's.
lip of rubber. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I think all the race, the high level race teams are all wiring the grips on anyway. But yeah, nothing drive you more crazy than a grip coming loose.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Stuff to take to track days. There's always the usual stuff. People should take the ability to put air in tires and things like that type of thing. What are some of the things that you've thought about or you take or you've seen that would be maybe a little bit unusual, but worth considering taking to a track day?
It's a really cool question to ask because I've seen some of your podcasts and you ask most of your guests this, like, what do you take to a track day? Um, and I think a seat is a massive one because you do a lot of sitting. You
Yep.
should do a lot of sitting. I should do a lot of sitting. I don't. But yeah, having a place to be able to relax, I think, is really important.
Yep.
Um,
Have you? Let me jump in there. Have you seen Al Samuel's chair?
no,
He
no.
takes it's like a full banana lounge. Like the
Mm,
legs fold out, and
mm.
I looked at that and I went, "That's a smart man. He's been around the track a lot, and between riding, he almost goes to sleep."
And you can buy the cheapest seat that's available, right? They're really easy to find.
Yeah,
But the ability to yeah relax is great. And fingers crossed you can. It means nothing's going wrong. It means your bike's behaving and you're behaving, and so you got a whole lot of chill out time. I've seen some really cool little stools. So for people that are, or they're an older style bike or a bike that requires a lot of adjustment. So having a little stool that sits with wheels, so you can wheel around. Because the amount of times that you are on your knees and leathers working on bikes, it sucks. It's really, really, really harsh on the gear. You know, your leathers get covered in oil and grit and gravel and all the rest of it. So having a stool is really, really helpful for those who fiddle. I think.
These are these workshop stools on wheels,
Yeah,
like
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
super cheap.
And they normally got a little tray, so when you're undoing the fairing bolts, you know, instead of putting them on the ground and kicking them off and all, they all disappear because pits are never beautiful, right? Having a little container, I've seen the magnetic ones you can put on the tank, so you can put all your bits and bobs. Because, yeah, it's being able to, when you take something off, being able to contain everything for me is really important to be able to put it all back on again. Um, yeah, I try and take a microfiber or a small towel. Like I use it for sport. I run around a squash court a bit, and a black towel is awesome with hand cleaner because you can get your hands dirty really easy. All it takes is to change one wheel and your hands are greased up.
Yeah.
So I have a black one for and some hand cleaner, just some like workshop hand cleaner, so you can actually clean your hands because 9 times out, like who wants to put greasy hands in your beautiful expensive gloves if you've got them. Like, you go to there's normally a tap, but the soap at the old toilets is normally not doesn't really cut the mustard, right? So a way to clean your hands if you're going to be working on bikes. And I take something for visor cleaning and helmets. So try and have that bloody pink or yellow or something that you don't want to put dirty stuff on so that you can really protect your visor. Visors are, and your helmet is really important, I think, to keep it clean. And in NZ, we get plenty of bugs and all the rest of it. So,
I think
yeah, I
people,
try.
if people don't realize that, like, and we see this at the school, you ride all day. I probably clean my visor a couple of times
Mm,
over the course of a day. There's that many little insects, regardless of whether it's a buggy day or not.
yeah,
You just get stuff on your visor. And it's,
absolutely, absolutely. So, yeah, being able to clean that visor, I think, is really important. And if, like, say you get a wet day or a day where you get a lot of fogging, then just having something instead of getting your t-shirt and doing the visor, like having something that's decent product and decent cloth to clean that. Because seeing is everything, right? So I really want to be able to see and clean and look after my gear. Yeah, I was trying to think of things that are a little bit different. I have I suppose my approach to going to the track is different because 9 times out of 10, people are riding my machines. They're turning up to ride someone else's being a hired machine. So I kind of like having a bit of redundancy with things that mean a bike couldn't work. So I always have a spare battery in my little toolbox.
you're right.
I replaced the battery in my ZX4RR with the lithium ion, a nice little Gucci light one. And I just took the stand one out and I stuck it in my toolbox. And that thing gets borrowed. I would say 80% of track days, my battery will get borrowed,
Interesting.
the spare battery. So someone will say, "Hey, do you have a battery charger? My battery, my bike just won't turn over." I go, "Yeah, I've got a battery charger." Take my battery for the day, and then they can charge their battery for the morning as well. And yeah, someone in the paddock normally the battery won't start, or the battery won't turn the bike over enough, right? So that's something that's very popular actually. Yeah,
I take the charger. I got a box there with tire warmers in it, and I always take the charger, which has got a fast connection to the side of the bike, and
yeah.
I know the charger will turn the bike over.
Oh wow, yeah,
Yeah,
grumpy charger.
even if the
Awesome.
battery's flat, because yeah, that man, how frustrating would it be if you can't get it started because you can't push
Well,
start a modern bike.
push starting modern bikes now gets harder with slipper clutches. The amount of electronics that are in bikes, the security systems in bikes and road
Electronic
bikes,
fuel injection. Electronic
right?
fuel injection, and unless there's power, it ain't going to start.
So yeah, it's they're just a little bit more. It's not the old things where you prime the carbs
Yeah,
and
right.
get kicking away it'll go. So no, that's one that gets borrowed a lot more than I anticipated. Yeah. Yeah. I've had a guy come back and borrow it the next track day, and I'm like, the next one you have to buy one, man. Same color,
You,
same bike.
there's an opportunity here because for the right price, you can sell batteries. You could
Petrol batteries, exactly. Yeah,
just
maybe I
have a
should.
couple for sale.
Yeah, yeah, funny, eh? So,
Yeah.
mm,
I got a couple of things that I've found as well, in addition to those things you talked about. I always carry a set of gloves. I saw this at down at out at Warwick, Motorcycle Sportsman's. God, I got a mental block. Morgan Park.
Yes.
You know, people taking gloves because there's a bit of dirt. When you ride back into the pit, and just whack it. Yeah, correct. For wiping the tire before you put your tire warmers on. So that was one. I always carry now because this struck me in Townsville. We needed to tie some stuff down. It was super windy, and you couldn't hammer a peg in the ground. And then a guy comes up and he goes, "Oh, I'll try one of these," and it's a screw-in peg, and he just had a drill.
Oh, yeah.
He went, "Zzz," just drilled it straight in. It's a camping peg that's designed to drill into the ground.
Wow.
I carry those everywhere now in the car. If I need to tie down, like if you
Anything.
put a gazebo next to your car, or if you're gonna sit out there or whatever. But yeah, super useful.
That's really smart. Can you throw the link of that up on this? Because that's a phenomenal idea.
From I just went to a camping place.
Right.
No,
And it
no, I
goes
didn't.
with the
No,
drill
I
bit.
bought them. I bought them through. They were like Oz Camping is the
Right.
brand. I bought them through eBay.
Yeah, right.
I just went straight to eBay, looked for screw-in tent pegs.
Depends.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the one, if you buy the right one, they come in a box like 8 or 16 or 12 or something, and they come with the device that plugs into your drill. Oh,
And that's it. Like 9 times out of 10, someone's got to drill the track.
correct.
Um, and yeah, gazebos and my last easy up got blown inside out.
Yep,
So that would have been, because 9 times out you don't have something to tie it to. You can put it up and you tie
correct.
one side of the car and then, yeah,
Yeah, and
right.
moved around. Zip ties, man. I don't know how many times I've been asked for zip ties. So I carry like a packet of them because people turn up and then they're going to put a transponder. They get hire a transponder. They get how do I attach the transponder holder? Well, you need zip ties. So that would be a big one. And the other one that I carry now, because it probably more so from a data perspective, is a pretty good tire temperature gauge.
Yeah,
It's
right.
a collection of data. What are they? They're like $30 or something, and it's a piece of information that I wanted to have. So I carry that around as well. I do carry some spares, and I only carry these spares because when I bought the double R, I was able to, I upgraded a whole bunch of stuff on it. I bought all the HP
Yeah.
options, and the bike doesn't come with the options on it. They actually fit them, and they give you all the parts they
Oh,
replace.
no. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so I've seen people crash, and they break a lever. That's the end of their day.
Yeah.
They break a foot peg, or a gear lever, or a brake lever, but particularly foot pegs and gear levers down at the feet, and that's the end of their day. Or they break a clip on. So in the box, I've got all those parts that were replaced. I've got a full set of foot pegs and levers and everything, clutch levers, brake lever on the handlebar, and a set of clip-ons. So they're kind of for me they're the main spares I would carry.
And I have pretty much identical for the higher bikes, the 300s. I have a set of rear sets, both left and right, and
Yep.
I actually set them up because they normally come disassembled. I set them up to the peg on and as much as you can without obviously attaching a master cylinder and what have you, so that if someone throws one down the road, it's a bit quicker for me to assemble. Same when I've got bars. I've gone to a high quality lever set, mainly because, and bars as well, gone to a proper clip-on bars because they seem to be, you'll drop them and they'll gap, but they won't bend and they definitely won't snap. So as opposed to the cheap AliExpress, which are nice and cheap, but yeah, as soon as they touch the ground, they bend and it has to be replaced. So the left-hand side, I actually have a spare clutch perch with a grip on it, with a clutch lever, with everything on it, so that if someone does drop it on the left, you can pull the old clutch bar out and put the whole new one in with everything on and just put the clutch cable in and
Yeah,
away you
right.
go. So try and have the spares that you're talking about, I totally agree, and then try and make it so that it's nice and quick to
Yeah.
change them over because I'm doing it for someone else's day, right? Someone else is trying to have a good day. But
Well,
yeah, real key.
that's that whole mentality of like the race teams. They go. I only saw a video on this the other day. The race teams, MotoGP, Moto2. that have the full componentry all set up, like, the particularly handlebars, the left handlebar, the right handlebar, they're complete.
Yeah.
Throttle, everything, wiring and brakes and switches and the whole lot. So they just whack them on. Um, yeah, but can be costly.
Well, yeah, how far do you go, right?
Yeah.
And you if you buy if you bought all those parts individually, then yeah. So that's what most once track day guys have done it a few times and ended their day early, then they tend to we'll get another set, and normally the Gart set go in the spares bin, right? So you pull out your real Gart crappy lever because you've snapped your good one,
Yeah.
but at least you got something. And not and I don't know about you, but as you said with zip ties. I would say 80% of the time it's other people borrowing stuff. Like it's a community, right? So someone's turned up and all their bike's fallen off the rear stand in the pits and they snap a brake lever or snap that little ball end off and so suddenly it won't pass tech inspection.
Yeah.
And they go around going, hey, does someone have a spare one? And you're like, yeah, man, borrow it for the day just so the community gets a better day, right? That
Yeah.
seems to be that's what I love about the track day environment is everyone's there to help you out and they want you to have a good day, which is really, really cool.
I did have a thought, and I meant to ask this about bike prep. Have you ever struck the situation where people overfill the brake fluid reservoirs? Because the whole concept of that they overfill them, they fill them to the top. There's no room for expansion when it gets hot. Yeah, and now they get brake application. Has it you ever struck?
Yeah. So I was at Hampton Downs at a race meeting, and a very ex-high-end racer from New Zealand was riding someone else's bike. So I won't say too many names. And they were having issues with brakes locking on, and it was a rear brake coming on and staying on.
Yeah.
And they were using a thumb brake setup. So, and in NZ we have some funny rules to do with how that works, um, and yeah, they were running into this hydraulic lock where brakes were coming on and staying on. So yeah, that's pretty average. Yeah,
That's
and the diaphragm's there for a reason, right? So
great. Well, I had this problem with a KTM I had. I took it in for a service to the dealer, and then I take it out, back brake caught fire.
yep.
I caught fire. It was ridiculous because it was just applying the brake and we're going for a long ride.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, that was my big, oh, hang on a minute, what's the cause of this? And it ends
yeah.
up being
Overfilled.
too much fluid. Yeah. Someone asked me the other day about the double R because I looked at it and they said, you need fluid. I said, what do you mean I need fluid? They go, because it's got the thumb brake on the left hand side, little fluid container, and the front brake on the right hand side. They said, your fluid's down at the minimum. I go, correct. Exactly right. That's where I put it, you
Yeah.
know, whereas they want to top it right up. They go, no advantage unless you're riding upside down.
Yeah, I think there's a false sense of security there that if you got more fluid for some reason, the brakes will last longer.
Yep.
Um, it's a good tell to know where your fluid sits,
Yep.
particularly your front brakes, because that will indicate if your pads are low, right?
Yep.
So I like my front brakes to be in the middle,
Yep.
pretty much as much as I can in the middle. And if your fluid is sitting on the min or below min, normally it's because your pistons are out, which is because your pad material's gone. So it sort of tells you that your pads are nearly done.
Right, right, right.
It's a good little tell, right? So, um, but yeah, there's nothing beating going and looking at them either.
Making sure you got good pads.
Well, yeah, because they disappear quick, and different pads work, last in different lengths. Yeah, it's really amazing.
Do you use carbon pads?
I have tried. I remember when we had SBS branded did a dual carbon pad. This would have been over 10 years ago now, and they were really, really popular here and really, really popular with races. Um, they were great for stopping power once hot, but they
Mm.
were the action and the feedback was really interesting. So most people would say that it was almost like you were braking and then you had to release brake pressure to maintain the same stopping force because as they got hotter, they got better.
Yep.
Um, and then people were saying that they were pretty harsh on the discs and would often you'd come back into the pits and if you've got really, really boiling hot pads and your discs stayed, this was an old wives' tale, you just stayed in the same place, you could actually warp your discs from the heat. I don't know how true all that stuff was, but I found the feel was really odd. So they would work average when they're cold, really good when they're hot, but
Yeah.
they would change throughout the ride. So
Yeah.
it kind of was like your brakes were changing throughout the race. So I didn't stay with them.
Interesting. I reckon that's a wives' tale about the warping because the heat would be in the metal, not in so much in the sintered material or the carbon.
I agree. Yeah, yeah.
Interesting. Oh, because I've never seen that. I know in cars brakes can warp if you get them really hot and then you go through water.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know,
Gotta mix.
there's a massive temperature shift.
Yeah,
But I thought I'd ask you because I tried them. I put those Brembo SCs, which
oh,
are
yeah.
the carbon version, and I kind of liked them. You know, once they were warm, I never noticed a lot of variation. Obviously, I wasn't racing; I was just doing a track day.
Right.
But definitely, that first application was like, oh, where the brakes go.
Yeah,
Actually, got me thinking now. I might do a video on that actually and compare it. I want to see what the stopping distance is with a cold carbon pad.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know, and compare it.
I had cast iron rotors on my sort of Frankenstein bike that I built, the last race bike.
Yeah,
And they were phenomenal once you got a bit of heat into them and you have certain pads to match them.
yeah,
Like what the stuff that used to come standard on the old Ducatis.
yeah,
And I remember I did a hill climb event in New Zealand called Leadfoot. So it's about a K long, about 1.3 Ks long up a driveway, sort of Goodwood-esque. And they were the worst decision because they pretty much started working at the end.
yeah,
So it would have been better to throw my stainless discs on, like my wet discs, if that makes sense.
yeah,
Um, yeah, so it's really interesting. I don't know enough to really be a specialist in it, but
yeah.
uh,
I've heard
yeah,
conflicting, information. I think it relates to the type of riding people are doing. If they're doing I don't know, a 20-minute race, 30-minute race and riding really hard and fast and braking hard, then there's probably pros for it. But the average rider out there probably shouldn't worry about it too much. There's going to be too much cooling between corners or whatever, and who knows? Because a lot of people,
yeah, yeah, and I think the standard application of most discs are normally suitable for most standard riders. It's really interesting. We've got a local Brembo representative and dealer here in my hometown, and he talks a lot about standard discs. And I've actually experienced this, the ZX6 that I use here, the 636, the CSSNZ, and I've done braided lines and some good pads. Standard master cylinder, and we were chasing brake fade. The standard brake fade as the session goes, the old lever comes towards the bar. And the pads made a good difference. The braided lines definitely made a great difference. And it was way more predictable, the drop and lever application, or the amount of lever coming to the bar. And then I started looking, okay, well, do I need to go to a master cylinder? Is a master cylinder going to eradicate it completely? And this gentleman, Chris Osborne, Aussie Performance, kind of was like, it's probably the discs. And I sort of was like, how are the discs making the lever go spongy?
right?
And so he talked about the standard discs, as they get hotter and hotter, the stainless discs, they can dish. So as they get hotter, the outside of the disc and inside of the disc has different temperature because of different speeds of the disc. And
Yep.
so the discs themselves can dish. And so
Yep.
what that means is the pads have to travel further, or the caliper has to travel further um, to make the mating surface. So and he said, what you'll find is if you go out and you get them spongy, and then you go out in the next session and you have an easier session, then it will come back because the discs will cool down as you ride. And that's exactly what happens. So I can go out and get a spongy lever, go out and then an easier session, and the lever comes back. Absolutely not a problem. So there's no air in the lines, there's no boiling of fluid. It's the standard discs dishing,
Wow.
which have got quite a few Ks on them of CSS and coaching Ks. So yeah, that's just one thing, right? Um,
That's
and
interesting because I was talking to Ian about this. We're talking about race bikes and setup, and he asked. He said, "Do you have T drive discs?" I said, "Well,
yeah,
I do actually. I got a set of Wave rotors
yeah,
that are a T drive high end. They weren't cheap, and again, Shane Kinderus provided those. And
right.
what you just explained then kind of answers the question: why would you go to those?
And that's what most racers go to, that T drive system, and it's for consistent disc feel.
Interesting.
Yeah.
There's more to that. That's a whole new topic. Wonder.
Sorry.
Well, I think we've covered everything we needed to cover here. Um, I get nothing else specifically. I do have a joke for you.
Oh.
A mechanic was removing a cylinder head from the motor of a motorcycle when he spotted a well-known heart surgeon in his shop. The surgeon was there waiting for the service manager to come take a look at his bike. The mechanic shouted across the garage, "Hey, Doc, can I ask you a question?" The surgeon, a bit surprised, walked over to the mechanic working on the motorcycle. The mechanic straightened up, wiped his hands on the rag, and said, "So, Doc, look at this engine. I open its heart, take valves out, fix them, put them back in, and when I finish, it works just like new. So, how come I get such a small salary and you get the really big bucks when you and I are basically doing the same work?" The surgeon paused, smiled, leaned over, and whispered to the mechanic, "Try doing it with the engine running."
Good. I like
Anyway,
that.
that's all I got.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice.
On that
Nice.
note, mate, I got nothing else. Unless you got something else you want to add.
No, I think I just wanted to finish off by saying those people who have never been to a track day before or have considered going to track days, it can be. I think we forget how nervous it can be or how intimidating that the track environment can be to those who have never been there. And it's good talking to people, going down and go down and have a look at a track day when there's people there and see the family atmosphere that's there because it's ever since going, like, it's sadly it's incredibly addictive. I sort of I don't think I ever recovered. If you call yourself a trackaholic, I'm not off the wagon. I'm not whatever however terminology is. I've just worked out different ways to stay allowed to go to the track by the wife and really enjoy working with new people coming to the track.
Yep.
And I think those who are interested should do a bit of research, pop on down. It's one of the best environments I've found personally to improve my riding and make friends. I got lifelong mates because of the racetrack. So yeah, it's that's why me and you are mates, right? It's
Yep.
really cool.
It's like a positive addiction. I reckon it is.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it costs the same as most addictions, I reckon.
Yeah.
The joke I was told by John Groom was, "How do you get $2 million into a race team? You start with $5 million." So, yeah, it doesn't really matter what you've got.
Yep.
You end up quite addicted to spending on it. But
We get to ask Mark McGregor if that's true. 'Cause
mm,
he,
uh,
he's poured
yeah,
his heart and soul into the addicted to track race team. So I love that name too, by the way.
and it's a fantastic one at that, right?
Yeah.
So, seen a couple now, and I really rate Mark's.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been watching the Ant West closely. Um, Are you you prompted this thought, keeping the missus happy, still going to the track, and are you one of these people who tries to tell your missus that this is work? You ever like I am not successful in getting this message across at all. How are you going with that?
Yeah, yep, yeah. I tell her it's work, absolutely. Yep. And I'm trying, right? That's
Yeah.
my journey this year is to try and make that a thing. So,
Yeah.
to try and make something of it in a professional sense. So,
Yeah.
and she's enabling me and allowing me to give it a good stab. So, let's see how long it will last and see if it covers what it needs to cover. So,
Yeah. Well, very cool. We'll catch you again next time.
awesome, George. Thanks so much.